The 2015 Rugby World Cup is about to kick off in England, and with me to preview the tournament is IB Times sports editor Nick Howson. Nick, we'll look first at the hosts, England. There's a cautious optimism in the camp at the moment. The warm-up fixtures have been a tad inconsistent, defeat to France followed up by victory over Ireland. Do you think there's a chance that this England team could emulate the side of 2003 and go on to win the tournament?
Well, they certainly don't start as strong as favourites as the team in 2003 did. That being for a number of reasons. Firstly, the lack of experience, really, lack of genuine tournament experience. There's really only a handful of those players who went to the harrowing tour in 2011, which was probably the most disappointing and I say controversial appearances by an England sporting team in a major tournament for a while. Nothing went right there. So although it's good that there's not much experience from that, there's no experience from at all. You look at someone like George Ford, who'll play at 10. He's got wafer thin experience at an international level, so that's one of the real concerns. I would also think that just generally results. I mean, England haven't won the Six Nations under Stuart Lancaster. That's, I guess you could argue, a good barometer as well. No silverware there to back up what's been, gradual improvement. But one thing I think you can say is they go into it as a contender, certainly, which is great. I think it's going to be one of those tournaments really where England's success is going to dictate the success of the tournament. Slight cliche, but I think it hasn't quite ignited the imagination of the public yet, and it's going to take that opening game against Fiji and maybe a win against Wales or Australia, and it's going to take something like that to really spark a lot of interest in this tournament. So yes, now England aren't the big favourites they were maybe in years gone by, but they certainly go into it as among a group of teams that can certainly have ambitions of winning it.
If England aren't the favourites then we certainly know who are, and that's reigning champions New Zealand. Heading into this tournament, are the All Blacks still an unstoppable force?
I think unstoppable, I mean, in regular play, yes. I think the one thing we do know about New Zealand is when it comes to a major tournament, then they've never really been able to replicate the performance they have maybe in the Rugby Championship or in the autumn series when they come to the Northern Hemisphere. They're never quite able to recapture that. And I don't think really, at the moment, that no one's been able to sort of nail down exactly why. For that very reason, you don't install them as overwhelming favourites. Even in winning the tournament on the home turf in 2011, they did it in very nervy fashion, and really France probably should have won the final in the end. So they go into it as you say, the favourites. But I don't think, but we're still to be convinced that they can replicate. If they can replicate the form from, say, the unbeaten season, then there's a chance they could blow everyone away. But fortunately, we don't see them as this all-conquering team in a major tournament.
And if that's the case, then we know that the Southern Hemisphere teams generally perform well, but
yeah.
Who are the other dark horses we could be looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think after New Zealand, there's sort of probably another sort of tier of probably 4 or 5 teams that will have genuine ambitions of winning it. As you say, the other 2 Southern Hemisphere nations, South Africa, who almost the complete contradiction to New Zealand, so they're very much a tournament team, I think. They're set. If the weather sort of turns in England, they've got the game to adapt to conditions that might not be conducive for ball playing. In Australia, you've almost maybe got the opposite in terms of they've sorted out set piece now, they've sorted out that scrum, and they've got maybe the best backline in the whole tournament. They've got Israel Folau as probably the most uncompromising back maybe in the world, and they've got a really strong backline. They can probably put anyone to the sword. The turnover ball is going to be really important for Australia. After that, it's good we can look at the Northern Hemisphere nations. I think obviously Ireland are probably, as successive Six Nations winners, are probably the strongest contender. That's also a lot to do with the fact that their route probably even to the semi-final is relatively easy. It'd be interesting to see how they get on against France, who, as we know, again, another tournament team. They've really been in disarray under Philippe Saint-André, and this is going to be his last involvement with the French team before he leaves at the end of the tournament. So it'd be interesting to see how they get on as well. So I think those are the core teams that we're looking at in terms of trying to win the tournament. I think Wales are unfortunately gone now. I think over a tournament that may last 4 or 5 matches, only 4 matches in the pool stage, and obviously how difficult that pool A is with England, Australia and Fiji. I think the loss of Lee Halfpenny, Rhys Webb, and obviously the fact that Jonathan Davis wasn't going to be involved anyway as well, that's 3 sure starters gone. Particularly Halfpenny, who's a 10, 12 points a game guy. That's going to make a real difference over a long period. So unfortunately, I think Wales are out of it. But I think there are 4 or 5 sides that can have realistic ambitions. They're really refreshing to go to a major tournament where it's really wide open.
Well, for all our coverage of the Rugby World Cup, go to our website, ibtimes.co.uk.